Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ascentia's Audience Intelligence virtual event series. I'm Pixan, your moderator for today's session on reputation intelligence and how it can help companies build stronger brands. Now, before we begin, let's take a moment to revisit some important highlights from our last webinar. Now, in episode 1, we delved into how AI is transforming the way PR and communications professionals gather and analyze audience data. We also explored the opportunities and challenges that come with it, including ethical considerations for data privacy when creating audience-led content. Now, another intriguing point that arose during the conversation was the recognition that AI, while powerful, cannot replace the human touch and emotional intelligence that PR and communications professionals bring to the table. These were just a few highlights. If you'd like to revisit the entire content, the recording of the previous episode is available on our Ascentia YouTube page. Now that we're all caught up, let's get cracking with today's discussion as we talk about reputation intelligence and how it can help companies build better, stronger brands. Before we say hello to our speakers, let's take a moment to understand what reputation intelligence is all about. In today's interconnected world, reputation plays a crucial role in the success of businesses, organizations, and even individuals. Reputation intelligence is a process of gathering, analyzing, and managing the vast amount of data and insights related to an entity's reputation. It empowers businesses to make informed decisions, mitigate risks, and enhance their overall reputation in the digital landscape. Reputation intelligence is no longer a nice to have. It's become a critical aspect of any organization's strategy. In a time where information spreads almost instantaneously, businesses need to stay ahead of the game. Take Singapore Airlines for an example. SIA has been in the news lately due to passengers perceiving a decline in the quality of their in-flight. Customers expressed their discontent on social media, particularly regarding the removal of appetizers and the introduction of paper boxes for serving meals. These changes were deemed inconsistent with the company's esteemed world-class image. The significant negative response from the public has served as a valuable lesson for the airline, prompting them to recognize the importance of promptly addressing customer feedback. The CEO of Singapore Airlines acknowledged this and highlighted the strategies being implemented to uphold an exceptional customer experience. This just goes to show how, by harnessing the power of reputation intelligence, organizations can proactively monitor, assess, and shape their reputation, ensuring they maintain a positive image and stay competitive in their respective industries. Due to the rapid nature of digital communication, negative assessments or rumors about a company can swiftly proliferate online, leading to a tangible crisis in reputation. Whether these reputational risks are self-inflicted or externally triggered, these events, which we equate to be like a stream of light, would spark interest and discussion about the event. While these events may be beyond our control, they're not necessarily beyond our understanding. As the event goes through the media prism, the media have a profound impact on shaping these external events through media-constructed realities and subsequently influencing audiences' perception of social reality. By identifying who these audiences are, companies can begin to tailor their messages that each of these audience segments can resonate with and get on the journey towards enhancing their reputation. Our fundamental focus lies in understanding audiences. That's why we zoomed in on the attention trail, an audience-first approach that analyzes the mainstream media, social media, search and web analytics for insights into what really matters. Now, let's explore how leveraging the analogy of light and prism inspired by the buzz around generative AI can help organizations effectively manage the potential reputational risk associated with deepfakes. While we have been discussing the benefits of artificial intelligence in enhancing the work of communication professionals like ourselves, it also introduces a new threat for companies. The emergence of fake or manipulated content created with the aid of modern technology and artificial intelligence, commonly known as deepfakes, poses a substantial threat to the reputation of individuals, institutions, and companies. Criminals exploit this technology to obtain sensitive data, distribute false information, and consequently harm the company's reputation. All that's required is a sufficient amount of photographic material of the individual one wishes to imitate, which, come to think of it, can be easily obtained through platforms such as Google, Facebook, and other social media sites. While this may initially appear harmless, entertaining in private life, It has become a tool for malicious purposes, leading many individuals to fall victim to scams, resulting in emotional stress and financial losses. Within the corporate sphere, the consequences of deepfakes can be devastating. Consider a scenario where a video is released, seemingly depicting the CEO making controversial statements. Even if the PR department swiftly responds and denies the authenticity of the video, stakeholders may remain skeptical. By the time concrete evidence is provided, significant harm to the company's reputation may have already transpired. After all, studies indicate that a considerable portion of reputational damage occurs within a mere 24 hours after an incident. Once a well-executed deepfake circulates online, it becomes challenging to discredit its credibility and halt the ensuing reputation crisis. Now, as with any reputation risk management, comprehensive prevention and preparedness are paramount when it comes to addressing deepfakes. Bringing the light and prism analogy back, deepfakes are our external event, triggering discussion among various audiences. As news coverage surfaces and online conversations about deepfakes gain traction, audiences begin to shape their perceptions based on their understanding of the issue. For organizations hit by deepfakes, immediate actions should be taken to mitigate the damaging effects this event has on the company's reputation. Transparent communication is key here for companies to regain trust. Based on a clear understanding of the different audience segments engaging in discussions related to this issue, companies can begin to tailor messages aimed at each important audience segment. In fact, identifying who has been particularly interested in a topic opens up opportunities for collaboration for a company trying to get back on the saddle to rebuild or strengthen its reputation. Now, what if the source of reputational risk originates from within an organization? The Elon Musk and Twitter saga serves as a prime example. In this context, let's examine the influence of a company's leadership on both the leader and organization's reputation. When Elon Musk initially made the decision to acquire Twitter, he made promises of improving the company by enhancing transparency, reducing the presence of bots, strengthening its business, and promoting free speech. However, months into Musk's leadership, the future of both the company and the platform appears uncertain. Following the acquisition of $44 billion in late October, Musk began implementing cost-cutting measures, laying off employees, and allegedly neglecting some financial obligations. Moreover, policy changes overseen by Musk have raised concerns about the platform's safety and reliability, reduced transparency for researchers, and deterred top advertisers. Musk's main strategy to grow Twitter's business through a revamped subscription model has resulted in chaos, but has failed to attract a significant number of subscribers. When we put all the events through the media lenses and reputation intelligence framework, in hindsight, the reputation crisis facing Elon Musk and Twitter could have been avoided if they had paid attention to the signals from the stakeholders and listened to what they're saying. For example, if Twitter had been more transparent about its moderation policies, it may have been able to avoid the backlash from users who felt that their voices were being silenced. Additionally, if Elon Musk had been more clear about his plans for Twitter, he may have been able to avoid the confusion and uncertainty that has plagued the company since he took over. For both Twitter and Musk, the stakes for success are high. Any negative impact on Musk's reputation resulting from his leadership of Twitter could potentially affect his broader business empire. Moving forward, the main focus for Twitter and Musk is to rebuild their respective reputations. As seen in previous example dealing with deepfakes, the PR teams for Twitter and Musk must identify key stakeholders and target appropriate messaging to effectively communicate and engage with them, with the aim of positively influencing their perception of both entities. As PR professionals, we must understand our target audience, their media preferences, and the messages that resonate with them. This enables us to create captivating content that addresses their needs and values. At iSentia, we believe audience intelligence is crucial for organizations, allowing them to provide relevant solutions in preferred formats and enhance their reputation. Now, let me introduce two innovative advancements in audience, media, and data intelligence that have been seamlessly incorporated into the two case studies earlier. Narrative diffusion is a comprehensive measurement approach that examines the movement of trends and topics across social media, online search, and mainstream media. Through this approach, we dive deep into each type of data, addressing questions such as how effective are our mainstream media narratives? Did our narratives resonate with the target audience on social media? Can we identify potential gaps in our communication efforts? And who resonates the most with our narrative on social media? To achieve this, we measure various key metrics, including sentiment analysis, gap analysis between mainstream and social media, top advocates and detractors, search analytics, as well as audience profiling. Narrative diffusion fulfills several needs. For instance, we can identify gaps between mainstream and social media regarding our own messages, enabling us to refocus our published narratives accurately. By staying informed about organic topics on social media, we can develop targeted communications responses. And our audience insights provide a deep understanding of demographics, psychographics, and behavioral traits on social media, enabling the creation of tailored messages that resonate better with the audience. In addition to tracking the flow of narratives across different media, imagine having the ability to understand what influences our reputation among competitors and target audiences. Now, this is where reputation intelligence comes in. Our reputation intelligence framework identifies the key drivers of perception as our intelligence helps surface the factors that shape brand reputation and drive conversations. It enables us to make impactful changes that are measurable and align with our business objectives. Furthermore, our reputation intelligence enables the quantification of reputational threats across various audience segments. This empowers us to proactively address concerns and enhance our corporate reputation. Additionally, it assists in strategically disseminating communications within networks to improve brand perception and tackle key issues. Essentially, our reputation framework brings structure to brand data sets, organizing conversations into core pillars that represent key reputation drivers. Our scoring system takes into account various metrics and are combined to generate a comprehensive score reflecting the overall tone and impact on brand reputation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to our panel discussion to uncover the power of reputation intelligence as we unlock the secrets behind cultivating a robust and resilient reputation in an ever-connected and dynamic landscape. Without further ado, let me introduce our all-star panel here. First, we have Vladimir Guevara, or Vlad, as previously called. Vlad is a highly experienced communications leader with diverse background in the Philippines, Singapore, and London. Before transitioning into corporate communications, Vlad had a successful career as a journalist, writing numerous articles over a decade for various esteemed publications, including the Straits Times, Dow Jones, and Wall Street Journal. Thank you for joining us today, Vlad.
Hi, Pixan, and thanks so much to our friends and to all our listeners. And I'm very happy to join you guys. As a Pixan inferred, I worked with different media organizations. I was a journalist for roughly 12, 13 years, and I've been doing PR comms for about 10 years. So I've done that jump, and I'm happy to be part of this panel.
Right. Next, we have Arun Sudaman, the CEO and editor-in-chief from Provoke Media. Arun's career has involved analyzing media, marketing, and communications industries in various countries. He's a recognized figure in industry. He was inducted into the ICCO Hall of Fame in 2015 and named Journalist of the Year at the PRCA Asia Pacific in 2022. Happy to have you here with us today, Arun.
Thank you very much, Paksan. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel, and I really look forward to the discussion.
Our third panelist for today is Tarika Kandedi, Associate Account Director from iSentia. As the leader of iSentia's commercial account management team in Singapore, Tarika brings a wealth of regional knowledge and a demonstrated history of providing actionable intelligence for strategic success, particularly in areas such as reputation and crisis management. Welcome to the panel, Tarika.
Thank you, Peksan. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. I'm excited to be having Vlad and Arun and yourself here today.
Likewise. Now, with such an impressive lineup, we're confident that today's webinar will provide you with actual insights and practical strategies to elevate your organization's reputation. Let's kick things off by setting the context for reputation. How important is it for companies to have a strong reputation in today's hyper-connected world? I'd like to direct this question to all of our panelists, and I'm going to start with Arun.
Me first. Thank you.
Yes.
Sure. I mean, it's obviously I don't think reputation has ever been more important. I think it's quite an easy answer to give at any point if anyone's ever asked me this over the last 20 years. But today we are seeing a generation emerging that is increasingly making decisions based on trust and values, and that's in terms of both consumption, so in terms of buying products, but also, for example, in terms of employment. And I think it's critical to remember how important reputation is from an employee engagement perspective, particularly when you have such a fierce war for talent going on in so many sectors across the world. Meanwhile, because of the various ESG criteria that are emerging in different markets and different jurisdictions around the world, all of that means that for the first time, I think, really, companies face real consequences and penalties for not living up to their commitments in terms of environmental, social, and governance standards. And we've already seen companies falling foul of ESG standards, particularly in Europe. And that's crucial, I think, from a reputation perspective, because companies and organizations can no longer just talk the talk, they have to walk the walk. And finally, I would just say that because there are so many sources of information and misinformation, and Paksan, you outlined many of them so well in your introductory presentation, I think people are relying more than ever on their peers, and in fact on business in terms of who they trust. And so without a credible reputation, you really are risking mistrust. And I think the consequences now are more serious and more grave than they have ever been.
Let's put a pin on the ESG part that you've mentioned, Aaron. We'll be talking about it in a little bit later. Let's now move to Rad. What say you, Rad?
Yes, Pixan, I just want to add on to what Aaron has mentioned. And I would like to refer to your presentation earlier. You mentioned Twitter. So I think one of the aspects which I think was kind of like missing in there is the current market value of the company. I believe a couple of days ago, I can't remember the name of the VC, or was it one of the investors? I believe it was Liberty Capital. They put out a statement which, if you extrapolate that, it shows that the value of Twitter is less than half before Elon Musk bought it. I believe it's now close to just a third of the price of before. So from what was promised to what has been delivered, they're two different worlds, really. And we have seen the sequence of events leading to that. This just shows to us the very quick pace of change in this super highly connected world, where one CEO says something on social media, it easily gets shared and retweeted and commented on and liked or disliked all over the world. So the impact is super, super quick. So I know by order of magnitude, that's just one example, but it just shows how a company could be affected by a series of events. And these things, usually they take a longer gestation period before social media, before the internet. But now with the advent of all sorts of social media coming up pretty much every 6 months or a year, we can probably see more of these. And this pace could possibly even be faster in the near future.
Thanks very much, Lad. What's your viewpoint on this, Tarika?
Thanks, Paksan. So yeah, I definitely want to add on to what Arun and Vlad were mentioning. And I think the fun part of being last is most of my points got taken. But I'd like to just add on to another aspect that I think is also very important, which is with reputation builds resilience. So this becomes an armor during a time of crisis, and it earns the benefit of doubt, helping companies weather the storm, recover faster, and also maintain that customer loyalty. So this could be from a business perspective, as well as touching on Arun's employee engagement part of it. So touching on that credibility. So not only for your brand to external stakeholders, but internal stakeholders as well. And I think to Vlad's point regarding the market value of an organization. So studies have also clearly shown that companies with higher reputation or better reputation tend to outperform their competitors. So to enhance that reputation really builds on your brand value, drives your customer loyalty, and also positions any organization as a market leader. So I think just to kind of wrap that up, I think it's very important this is a very important discussion as reputation shapes the aspect of success, right from attracting your customers or seizing business opportunities. So I think prioritizing and managing that reputation can definitely give you that undeniable competitive advantage in the market.
The eventual challenge is that reputation is very important to companies as it helps them to stand out from the competition, and it's especially relevant in times of crisis. All right, so since the start of today's webinar, we've been talking about reputation intelligence and how it contributes to building a strong brand reputation. But just to set the stage for deeper exploration, what does reputation intelligence mean to you?
Sorry, is it me? Was it to me first? Sorry, I missed it. Yeah, sure. I think pretty simple for me. I think reputation intelligence is insight and information that can help to better understand and ideally shape an organization's reputation. And that's just one sentence. I think there's a lot of complexity behind that, and it is actually, as I've seen over many years of looking at PR campaigns and reviewing award entries, for example, it's actually very difficult to get to. And I think we can talk more about that in this discussion. But I think from a basic perspective, that's what it means to me.
If I could just chime in. Oh, sorry.
Sure. But please go ahead.
Okay.
Please go ahead. If you don't mind,
Thanks,
Tarika.
Thanks, Pixan and Tarika. Well, to me, reputation is almost like two things. If I can do a bit of an analogy, it's almost like a mirror and also a thermometer, because it allows you to see how you really look like. And sometimes you need that appreciation from other people's point of view. As they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And to me, and there's I forgot the term in psychology, we always overestimate our own value. That's why we need this objective and empirical data from reputation intelligence to exactly know where we are positioned in the minds and the hearts of the people that we reach out to. And to me, reputation intelligence is also a bit of a thermometer, because it helps you gauge whether you're too hot or too cold, but there's a certain temperature where you're just right, for a room to meet the needs of your customers and your stakeholders. So to use that analogy, I think it's a bit of a mirror and a thermometer. That's how I see it. Over to you, Tarika.
Thank you, Val. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you were talking about in terms of gauging, how that perfect sort of reputation is. So I think to me, I would say that reputation intelligence is all about gathering, analyzing, and interpreting that data to make smart and informed decisions. So it's about the power to monitor brand perception, track sentiment, identify influencers, and also adapt to the stakeholder expectations. I think that's quite key as well. So it really helps you stay ahead in terms of any organization, whether it's to anticipate a crisis or just to make those data-driven decisions. So I think finally just wrapping up. So I think just around that element of trust that we were talking about, so I do believe that that's key as well.
So now that we have a better understanding of reputation intelligence, let's shift our focus to how organizations can effectively leverage this valuable set for long-term business success. From that, as someone experienced in PR and communications, please share insights on how reputation intelligence can be practically applied to aid the development of targeted and effective communication strategies.
I think you're on mute. You're on mute, Vlad.
Sorry about that. So thanks so much for alerting me. Thanks for that, Pixan. And there's a lot to pick up from that question. But before I answer that directly, I want to give an overarching view, my view first of how reputation intelligence can help us with our comms and our ethos. And I'll focus on the word ethos here. I think there is really no point in trying to measure your reputation and your brand if your company and your people, they themselves are not convinced about the direction of the company and where it should be. Do you want to be known as a very profitable company, or do you want to be a company which is known for its contribution to society? It's not either or. There's actually a balance in between. What I'm saying is that in terms of reputation, there's a spectrum. It depends where you want to be. There are researchers showing that, for example, just back in March, one of the best brands in America is Patagonia. It's this outdoor gear brand, but because it also reinvests and puts so much effort in fighting climate change, it has one of the best ranked brands in the US. But the other end of the spectrum, there are organizations which are really most hated, companies which are involved in corruption, companies which spread right-wing conspiracies or fake news, for example, or companies which mess up with people's data privacy. So there's a spectrum there. So my question really is, are you prepared to ensure that you're using reputation intelligence to enhance this positive direction of your company? Do you want your company to be good? So as long as you answer that primary question, as long as you're convinced that I'm using this intelligence to ensure that I'm on this step towards being a good company, then you're in this right direction. The wrong frame of mind would be, okay, I'm doing something questionable right now, but can I use reputation intelligence to kind of like check temperature? Would people accept this? Will people tolerate this? As long as it's tolerable, I'm okay with it. So that to me is one way of misusing reputation intelligence, because that only goes so far up until a journalist somehow discovers it and blows it up. But again, so this is where comms gets in. So to me, once you've set the direction of your company towards being a better company, which contributes to society, then that's where you can use reputation intelligence to tailor your communications, make sure that the right messages go to the right people, you address the needs of the stakeholders, you build relationships with people, and you identify potential new markets. And you can even identify perhaps what makes you better than your competition. How do you differentiate yourself from the competition? So all these are kind of like minutiae, even though they're big ideas on their own. But to me, the overarching idea really is, are you convinced that you're going to make yourself a good company in the long term? And I'm going to use reputation intelligence as benchmarks, as kind of like snapshots each year, so I can measure myself and see, okay, I'm going the right direction. So that's how I see rep intelligence helping out in our comms strategies.
So in another word, by leveraging data-driven insights, comms professionals can understand their target audience better, identify key messaging opportunities, and also tailor their strategies to resonate with stakeholders. Thank you, for sharing your take on this. Tarika, would you like to chime in as well and share how reputation intelligence can help organizations gain a competitive advantage over the competitors?
Definitely. Thank you, Peksan. So I think Vlad definitely touched on a very crucial part about being good and wanting to do good. So I think that's definitely key to everything, like kind of a starting point, right? So where that leads you in terms of comms professionals would be, how do I actually implement this, right? In terms of my day-to-day. So first would be to listen to your brand, right? So whether that's by getting real-time insights on your brand, providing, monitoring mention, sentiment, understanding those key themes Peksan was talking about across different media channels. This really helps you spot what are those issues, make those data-driven decisions, and also identify your key influencers and brand advocates to really help enhance your reputation. And when things are going well, of course, you want to be focusing on your brand advocates, but we also need to prepare in times of a crisis. So it's really crucial to also have early warning systems in place to ensure that in the event of a crisis, you would have certain elements put in place so you can nip the issue at the bud.
I hear you, Tarika. Yeah. So staying competitive in today's fast-paced business landscape requires organizations to be proactive and adaptable. Now, while we're on this topic, let's shift our focus to the growing significance of ESG considerations, which Alan mentioned earlier. Now, An essential element within ESG involves how companies can effectively use reputation intelligence to pinpoint prospects for improving their ESG reputation and engaging stakeholders. So, Arun, given your vast experience in journalism, could you share instances where reputation intelligence has assisted companies in identifying opportunities to enhance the ESG reputation?
Yeah, I can share a couple of examples that I often share when I'm asked this question. One from this region is Lenovo, which I think as a company has worked very hard. We've seen them do an enormous amount of work, actually, in terms of research and intelligence to understand how to build trust in various aspects of their business, and that has kind of been demonstrated by the strength and the longevity of their ESG policies. And I think just as importantly, and perhaps even more importantly, that has paid off with good business results, and now in this sort of phase of the cycle, less bad business results. But I think it's also really important when we're talking about ESG to also bear in mind that a lot of the work that companies do around ESG provides protection, provides actually the kind of resilience that Tarika was talking about earlier. And so sometimes it isn't always as visible, but it's almost like the kind of the iceberg analogy. It isn't always visible above the water. It kind of exists below the water, but it helps to build a really strong base of reputation capital. Another example that I often cite when it comes to ESG, and actually Vlad has already brought them up, is Patagonia. And I think they're an interesting example because it's a little bit left field in terms of how they have approached ESG. I don't think Patagonia has done a lot of research, a lot of monitoring. I don't think they've needed to go out and understand stakeholder expectations in the way that other organizations have done. But they have kind of understood fundamentally that their purpose is to help their customers, to help their stakeholders who care about the planet. So they focused heavily on fighting climate change. They donate all their profits. They've moved into becoming a trust. I mean, it's hard to think of an organization or of a company that takes its ESG commitments more seriously than Patagonia does, because it looks like they are focused on that above all else. And finally, the last thing I would say about looking for examples of companies that have used ESG, I think sometimes that's the wrong way around of looking at it. I think that companies need to be focused on ESG for the benefits it brings to society and to their business and to people, rather than looking at it in terms of how will this help my reputation. And I think that's too often that's what we see. And perhaps that comes back to Vlad's point. I think too often it is an opportunistic tactic that companies deploy in the hopes that it will give them a boost in the media, in the hopes that it will give them maybe a sentiment boost and maybe even a short-term sales boost or share price boost.
Thank you, Arun. You've shared a lot for us to digest there. I'm going to move on to the next question. Having examined the significance of utilizing reputation intelligence for achieving business success, let's now redirect our attention to the dynamic environment of measuring and evaluating reputation in the digital era. Now, I want to talk about one important consideration here: how to avoid being misled by reality. Now, I'm looking at you again, Arun. Showing on your background, I'm thinking you can empathize with the overwhelming influx of data. Can you provide some effective strategies or approaches for PR professionals to successfully navigate through the wealth of available data and concentrate on the most pertinent insights when they're evaluating reputation?
Sure, yeah, and I'll try and be really quick here because I'm aware we're on the clock, and this is a really big question. In a way, it's easier to pinpoint what metrics and what data shouldn't be used, and that's vanity metrics, I think, and we see far too much of that often. Things like likes and clicks and impressions, they're all nice, but they're all outputs. rather than outcomes. What we want to get to is what impact do these proxies, do these kinds of data have on actual reputation, have on brand, and ultimately on the bottom line. So yes, you can start with things like profitability. You can even look at things like share price. Some people would say that these are too distant to connect meaningfully with reputation and brand, which perhaps is true. So you can look at things like sales, you can look at employee satisfaction and loyalty. You can look at advocacy, which I think is often a really strong metric that I don't see that often, actually. Things like Net Promoter Score, for example. You can look at trust, although that requires a lot of research. And I mean, I'm mentioning a lot of things here because there isn't one silver bullet. I think, as we all know, there isn't one metric that will tell us or will help us to kind of understand the strength of an organization's reputation. And the additional challenge is that sometimes this work revolves around what didn't happen rather than what did. You know, you mentioned brand crises before. If a company doesn't suffer much damage from a crisis, that's a sign of a strong reputation and brand. But how do you measure that? I mean, we actually did in our annual crisis review. We worked with a company that was able to compare how quickly an organization rebounded from a crisis compared to kind of the average length of time in terms of things like share price and EPS. And I would love to say I understood it completely, but I didn't. But it gave us some idea. It gave us some kind of a metric in terms of how strong an organization's reputation is when it's confronted by a crisis, which I think is just as important, and in some cases may even be more important. So I think the challenge here is around figuring out what is the relevant data and figuring out what is irrelevant. And I think far too often we are deluged with irrelevant data.
Thank you, Arun. Let's continue the discussion by looking at what are some of the ethical considerations that companies should take into account when using reputation intelligence. Tarika, perhaps you'd like to start with this one?
Sure. So I think this ties perfectly into the conversation we're just having. So I think just 3 key things that I wanted to highlight would be transparency in data collection. So definitely obtaining that consent from your stakeholders when collecting personal information. Accountability and responsibility in practices. So this comes from an organization having clear policies and procedures in place for data collection, storage, and also the usage of that data. And finally, it would be around the mindful influence and impact an organization has. So as it has the potential to shape public opinion and behavior, I think it's really important for organizations to approach it with that mindfulness and integrity. And I think, again, tying to what Vlad and Arun were speaking about, that intention to do good really does, lead to positive impacts.
Thanks, Tarika. Now, when considering the implementation of reputation intelligence, let's pause and reflect on this one question. What are the key considerations that a company should prioritize when evaluating the need for reputation intelligence? Vlad, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thanks so much, Pixan. I mean, there are a few things to consider. For example, in using reputation intelligence, I need to consider, what are my stakeholders saying about me? I want to know how my brand is, how my image is. Do they trust me? And want to consider how the competitive landscape is like. I mean, these are, pretty important things. But again, I would hark back to what I said earlier. I think the number one consideration really is, and this also relates to what Aaron mentioned, do you just want to look good, or do you really want to be good? I think we've hinted through this panel that, sometimes some companies may use or misuse reputation intelligence just to go a certain distance to boost sales temporarily, or boost your share price in the short term. But are you ready to go for the long haul? So to me, that is the most important consideration. It runs to your core. And if your core is unshakable, you can be guaranteed that people would notice it. And if people see, it's almost like think of a person. To me, an organization is almost like a person. If a person has a really strong, secure core, and then you give off a certain light, a certain beauty, and people are attracted to you, they just go to you. But if people recognize that your core is something a bit more corrupt, dodgy, shady, they go like, they don't want to associate with you. They want to avoid you. It's the same thing. Organizations, after all, are made of human beings just like you and me, all of us. So to me, those are the main considerations before you invest in reputation intelligence.
Thank you. Our discussion will be
Yes. Sorry, if I could just add to what Vlad was saying,
Sure.
right, regarding just understanding that perception. So I think one more thing I would just want to add to that is also it's important to come out and talk about it. So referring to an organization as a person, right? So I think it's also important to talk to the effort. So staying out of the conversation doesn't necessarily mean that you're good or bad. So I think just to also get into that conversation when it comes to reputation intelligence.
Absolutely. Thanks, Erica, for contributing your thought there. Now, our discussion won't be complete if we didn't address the topic of artificial intelligence. Now, I'd like to invite our panelists to explore the impact of AI on the immediacy of measuring reputation. Vlad, do you think AI accelerates or decelerates the need to measure reputation?
Oh boy. To some extent, it does accelerate the need to measure reputation because, like I said earlier, I mean, with social media, the internet, everything, information just flows so much faster to so many people right now. So, but at the same time, so fine, I mean, that can influence people to some extent, but at the same time, we know that there's a lot of fake news going around, fake analyses, people with hidden agendas and political motives who can easily distort content and share really wrong, malicious content out there. So to that extent, it also kind of like decelerates. So on one hand, you can get information really quickly, but at the same time, almost equally, we need to be very measured and very wise in choosing which information is correct or not. So I'm really struggling between the two, whether it makes things faster or slower, but just because of the sheer intensity and speed of technology and information dissemination, I'd say by and large, we are going faster, but which just shows that there's a pressing need for really intelligent software to diffuse and do away and sieve through all the wrong, unnecessary, and wrong data.
That is on the acceleration path. What about you, Tarika?
Thanks, Mixan. So I think definitely echoing what Vlad was saying. So I do think, however, that acceleration, more than acceleration, I think it's really revolutionized the way we look at reputation management. So when again, opinions go viral in seconds, the need for reputation measurement is very critical. So I think most importantly, with the convergence of AI, when it comes to monitoring sentiment, tracking emerging trends, identifying influencing voices, shaping public opinion, it's like having a reputation radar that detects a shift in perception. So it really gives that agility to brands to respond effectively and proactively. So it's really about going back to what Pixani were sharing initially, right? So rather than playing catch up, we lead the narrative. I think another point that I just want to touch on before I probably hand it back to you is I think with AI, it doesn't stop with just measurement. It also amplifies your ability to take action, giving you that information to make those data-driven decisions.
We thoroughly enjoyed the insightful discussion with our esteemed panelists. Look at the time. It's time for us to conclude. Now, I'd like to turn to each panelist and ask for their one key takeaway that you'd like the audience to remember from today's webinar. Let's begin with Arun.
I would just say, when it comes to reputation intelligence, do not become preoccupied by vanity metrics. I think it's really important to sort relevant data from irrelevant data and understand that reputation is only as strong as the outcomes that it can produce.
Thank you, Arun. Moving on to labs.
Yeah, key takeaway for me would be just focus on being a better version of you and better version of your company. Be a good company, and all the data, the empirical data you get from reputation intelligence will simply follow. Those are nice benchmarks and metrics, but the intention really is to be a better company.
Thank you, Charika.
My key takeaway would be to the importance of proactive reputation management. So rather than wait for something to happen, to actively engage in that conversation, whether it's with internal or external stakeholders.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard our panelists articulately summarize the key takeaways they believe are crucial for you to remember. Now, we hope these insights will stay with you as you continue your journey in this field of reputation intelligence. Now, moving along, we'll begin our Q&A session now. Let's go to the audience for your questions. All right, so let's see. All right, so the first question is, what are some common mistakes that companies make when managing their reputation? And how can this be avoided through reputation intelligence? Do we have any taker for this question? Question is, what are some
sure,
common mistakes?
I can. Yeah, I can.
Thank
I mean,
you,
I think
Arun.
one common mistake I think that companies make is that they assume everyone thinks exactly the same way they think. And they assume that when they make a certain decision, everyone will understand it. And they assume that everyone is so happy and enthusiastic about their company as they are. And that's often not the case. And it just means that they just have to open their minds, open their ears, and just listen much more than they talk, and understand how they are really being perceived, how their decisions are being perceived, how their actions fit into the landscape of stakeholder expectations. So that's one mistake I can point to.
All right, thanks, Arun. Now, moving to the next question. What role does ethical data collection and analysis play in safeguarding a company's reputation?
I can chime in. I think, I mean, the answer is pretty much hidden in the question, really. I can only relate to, of course, the examples around, everybody knows this big social media company which sold data to another information company, which sold it to politicians around the world, and they got fined, millions of dollars. And so on one hand, you hurt your reputation, but on the other hand, you can also end up paying authorities and regulators. So it has everything. It's all got to do with your reputation. And because of what happened before, the reputation of those two companies has dropped significantly. So, and then people would, once your reputation falls, people would tend to jump ship and go to other forms of to your competitors. So it's got everything to do with reputation. So collecting data ethically is so important, and it also avoids you from getting into prison.
Thanks, Zach. Now, this next question is, how can companies strike a balance between data-driven decision-making and maintaining a human touch to enhance their reputation? Perhaps, Arun, would you
Maybe
like
I'll
to
take.
sure,
Go ahead, Arun. Okay, maybe I'll just start it off. So I think a couple of things here would be around really listening to your stakeholders and your brand. So I think Arun and Vlad have given us a lot of examples to think about, especially with Patagonia and Lenovo, and building that trust. So I think in terms of how you would do that would be around, from a data-driven perspective, understanding what people are saying about your brand, but to bring in that human touch to enhance reputation is to understand and make sense of that data to really drive your marketing strategies and go-to-market strategy.
Okay, thank you, Tarika. I think this next question is probably more relevant to Arun. How can brands initiate successful media relations as part of its brand reputation management strategy?
Mm-hmm. I think they have to welcome the scrutiny, actually. And they have to think, I think it's really useful if companies think like journalists. Journalists want to know where the bodies are buried, where the skeletons are in the closet, let's say. And too often, I think companies haven't even thought about it. They would just rather not think about it at all. But companies would benefit from thinking like journalists, understanding where are their areas of potential reputation risk and addressing them before anything comes to light. And that to me is the best way of dealing with media. And then you once you do that and you're able to welcome in media scrutiny, it becomes, I think, it's the kind of coverage that can help strengthen a brand as opposed to undermine or damage it. But it doesn't happen very often. I think too often it's a kind of adversarial relationship where I think companies are not that interested in really understanding where their areas of potential reputation risk are.
Thank you, Arun. One more question from our audience. Are there any risks or challenges associated with relying solely on data-driven decisions for managing companies' revenues? We have a volunteer for this question?
To me, that's almost like saying, let me listen to what people are saying, and based on what they say, I'll do my next business move based on that, instead of looking at your own strengths first as a company. So I think it really is the wrong way of looking at the situation. What's ideal would be you look at your strengths as a company, what opportunities you have, and you carry on and doing good as a company. And then hopefully all the data that you get would corroborate what you're doing already, instead of going the other way around. Of course, I mean, I'd say that applies to most companies. But then again, if your company is already doing so bad, you probably have to look at data to go like, where am I? Well, what is the audience saying? What are these focus groups saying about my company? So yes, sometimes that can apply, but only when you're really doing really bad as a company.
Thank you, Raj. So many questions, so little time left. Let's try to squeeze in one more question before we wrap up, shall we? Now, this one last question is about in the efforts to shape a company's reputation and build a strong brand, what is the role of employee feedback and the company's culture?
I would say, it all starts with the company's culture. Actually, I don't think you can have any efforts to shape reputation or build a strong brand without starting from the company's culture. And of course, in terms of defining a company's culture, that starts with employee feedback. So for me, it's culture comes first. And once you've defined your culture, you listen to employees, you work, it's an ongoing thing that it never stops. But only through that do you get to a strong brand, and then ultimately you're able to shape your reputation.
I need to add on to what Aaron has said about that. I totally believe in company culture, and you can almost gauge whether a company is going to succeed or not based on its culture and how open the CEO is, and the CXOs to the rest of the staff. There are companies out there which totally avoid not just the press, not just the media or analysts, they also avoid their own employees. How? They avoid town halls. They don't like putting out newsletters. They don't like having Q&As, for example. All they want to do, let's set up a meeting with the staff. I'll tell them our goals, our targets. 1, 2, 3, bam, bam, bam. And this is what you have to do for the next financial year, and meet your targets, and that's it. And then no room for Q&A. So there are companies like that. And usually this is where the retention is very low, morale is very low. But almost always I've seen, heard, and also been in companies where they allow open discussion. They ask for the hardest questions. And when you see employees asking the hardest questions, it is not to show up the leadership. It's because they're passionate about the company. They're passionate about their work, how they serve the community, how they serve the customers. And that's when you know you're doing really well. The death knell for any company town hall is when somebody says, any questions? And no one raises a hand, then you know you're in trouble. You know you're in trouble. You know you're healthy when your staff start asking tons of questions. Maybe like the way our audience now is asking questions. I'm very happy you're asking questions, guys, but I mean, we only have so much time. Thanks anyway.
Excellent. Thank you, Vlad. All right, we've come to the end of our webinar. Thank you, Vlad, Arun, and Tarika again for addressing these questions. To our audience, we hope you found today's session informative and engaging. Now, in conclusion, reputation intelligence is a critical tool for companies seeking to build a stronger and more resilient brand. By monitoring and analyzing customer feedback, competitor activity, market trends, companies can gain valuable insights that can help them to identify areas for improvement, mitigate potential risks, and adapt to changing market conditions. With the right reputation intelligence strategies in place, companies can build a more transparent, trustworthy, and customer-focused brand that's better able to attract and retain customers, differentiate themselves from the competitors, and ultimately drive business growth. As the business landscape becomes increasingly digital and interconnected, reputation intelligence is only set to become more important, and companies that invest in this area will be positioned to succeed in the years to come. Now, if you have any further questions or would like to have additional resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email or through our website. The recording for today's webinar will also be available soon, so do check out your emails and our social pages. We'll be releasing details for the third episode of our Audience Intelligence Virtual Series soon, so also look out for it in inbox. For those who join us for the whole series, will be awarded with certificates of attendance. Do please take a short moment to complete a feedback form to help us improve. Before we wrap up, I'd like to again extend a short thank to our panelists, Vladimir Guevara, Arun Sudhamani, for joining us today. Thank you again for joining us, and look forward to supporting your reputation management. See you again in the next episode. Pleasant.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Thank you.